So if we catch sight of them again, we'll be back there shortly. But in the meantime, the alleged assault on the Kremlin is not the first time that Moscow has accused Ukraine of carrying out an attack on Russian soil. So let's talk about this a little bit more. I'm joined here by former Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about this drone strike on the Kremlin. Remind us what happened and how likely is it that Russia's claim that Ukraine is essentially behind it, how likely is that to be true?
Yeah, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, that's when this dramatic footage was first revealed. Apparently a drone strike on the Kremlin. Russia immediately blamed Ukraine and has subsequently blamed America and anybody else they can point the finger at. Of course, Ukraine has absolutely denied that it's got anything to do with them. But it is worth closer scrutiny as to exactly why it's probably not Ukraine. Ukraine has done a number of attacks on Russian soil, but just over the border. And normally when they do them, they're planned with military precision and with great dramatic effect. This is the example of the Kerch Road Bridge, which was taken out, if you remember, in October. This was no minor explosion. This took out the bridge for several months as a result. And if you also look at the Sevastopol oil facility, which was only last week, there were 10 drones involved in taking this out. Russia claims to have shot down 8 of them. 2 evidently got through. But once again, the point is, it's a dramatic effect on the ground. And that's not the DNA of this Kremlin strike at all, which looks like a little minor explosion just above the roof of one of the buildings.
So if it's not Ukraine behind it, who else could it be?
Well, it could be resistance fighters in the city. The trouble is that this is a fortress. The Kremlin is an absolute fortress in terms of air protection, and it would be a suicide mission for anybody trying to do this from locally. And if you're going to do a suicide mission, you want to have a better effect than this. So it looks almost certainly it wasn't that. Or it's a Russian false flag operation. Who else would have actually been able to get a slow-moving drone through all the complex defences and actually get it to attack the building? Why also would they plan to miss the target? If you look at the drone footage slowly, the drone actually doesn't impact the building at all. It goes slightly past it, explodes above it, looks a big flash, but actually look at the smoke plume, it's a relatively small explosion, and it hasn't seemed to have done any lasting damage to the roof at all. And thirdly, it's interesting that Russia normally struggles with its media response to these sorts of things. It takes a few days for it to become coherent. This time, it was a unified response. It was very clear that it was blaming Ukraine. Almost like they were expecting it to happen.
So if it was Russia, why?
2 main reasons probably that would answer that why question, one of which is most military analysts think Russia is struggling on the battlefields, will be pushed back by Ukraine in the spring offensive, and therefore expecting some sort of false flag operation within Russia which would justify pulling their military resources back to the homeland to actually defend Russian population and therefore justify proactively why they bring it back in. But also the Victory Day celebration is on the 9th of May. At the moment, that was marking the Russian victory over Nazi Germany. Several of the local parades have actually been cancelled, ostensibly because the Russian power thinks they don't have the crowds being vulnerable to attack from Ukraine, which seems highly implausible. But most likely, it's because of the immortal regiments. These are normal Russians who walk along as part of the parade, carrying pictures of the loved ones that they've lost in a war. If they were joined on that parade by people who've lost loved ones in Ukraine, then that could significantly enhance the crowds and could actually expose the huge numbers of losses that Russia sustained on the battlefields. That's not something the Russian authorities will have wanted. So the explosion could justify cancelling the parade or at least curtailing it. The honest answer is, though, we don't know what's happened, but what looks most likely is this was some sort of staged event. However unbelievable, that does appear the most likely reason for this attack.
Fascinating. Sean, thanks very much indeed.